Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Penn Vicarage on this Ash Wednesday. Welcome to Lent. Welcome to Penn Vicarage. And as always, thank you so much for joining us for our Bible reading for this morning. Today, as we continue our adventure through the Psalms, today is Psalm 78, which if you know the Psalms well, you know is a bit of a whopper coming in at a mere 72 verses. So what I'm going to do this morning, I'm going to do it slightly differently. Normally, I'd read the reading to you first, then tell you about it afterwards. This morning, I'm going to tell you about it first, then read the reading afterwards. So this is what I think Psalm 78 is about. Essentially, Psalm 78 is in three sections. There's verses 1 to 9, which is the introduction. There's verses 10 to 39, which is a story of the people of God. What happened to them actually after they were set free from slavery in Egypt under Moses. And the third section tells us what happened before they were set free from Egypt under Moses when they were still in slavery. Okay, so you've got the introduction, the story what happened after the Exodus, and the story what happened before the Exodus. All right, so you've got three sections: introduction, what happened after, what happened before. That's how it goes. Okay, now the introduction essentially is saying, I'm going to tell you this morning, tell you a story in the words of a parable. Now you'll remember that Jesus used parables, and in fact, when Jesus said, "I will open my mouth in the words of a parable," it was Psalm 78. He was actually quoting. Now a parable is a story which illustrates something which you're supposed to learn from. It's a story with a purpose, if you like. So when Jesus told us stories like the Good Samaritan and things like that, he was telling us a story which had a meaning which we can learn from. And in the same way, Psalm 78, Asaph here is saying, I'm going to tell you the story of the people of God, but I'm not just telling it to pass on from generation to generation as a history lesson. I'm telling it so you can learn from it. Okay, and then he tells the story of the people of God after, then the people of God before. So you've got three sections: introduction, telling you it's a parable. Then you've got the story of the people of God after they left Egypt. And then the third section is what happened before they left Egypt. And both of these stories begin with the words Egypt and the fields of Zoan. You recognise that, you know he's about to tell you in the story. Okay, so you've got introduction, what happened after they left Egypt when they were in the desert, what happened before they left Egypt. Now, both of these stories, interesting enough, both kind of take the same pattern. And it goes like this. God is good and blesses. The second bit is, even though God is good, the people of God were unfaithful, either by turning to other gods or not trusting in God. God then acts in judgment upon them using a combination of carrot and stick, usually, but a combination of carrot and stick. And then the fourth bit is they kind of come back to God. And it usually ends reasonably well as well. So each of these two stories starts with God being good, the people being unfaithful, God acting in judgment upon them, carrot and stick, and then at the end, usually they come back to God again at the end. So that's how Psalm 78 works. Firstly, the introduction, telling you that we're telling this history lesson, but it's done as a parable, so you can learn lessons from it. Then you've got the story of the people of God after they left Egypt, before they left Egypt, but in both cases, the pattern is the same, which is that God is good, people tend to be unfaithful, God judges some judgment upon them, and then they come back to God again at the end. That's how it works. All right. Both of the stories beginning the words Egypt and the fields of Zoan. Hope that makes some sense. It's a long psalm. I'll read it to you now. Psalm 78. Here goes. Give ear, O my people, to my teaching. Incline your ears to the words of my mouth. I will open my mouth in a parable. I will utter dark sayings from of old, things that we have heard and known, that our ancestors have told us, that we will not hide them from their children. We will tell to the coming generation the glorious deeds of the Lord and his might, and the wonders that he has done. He established a decree in Jacob and appointed a law in Israel, which he commanded to our ancestors to teach their children, that the next generation might know them, and the children yet unborn, and rise up and tell them to their children, so they should set their hope in God, and not forget the works of God, but keep his commandments, and that they should not be like their ancestors, a stubborn and rebellious generation, a generation whose heart was not steadfast, whose spirit was not faithful to God. The Ephraimites, armed with the bow, turned back on the day of battle. They did not keep God's covenant, but refused to walk according to his law. They forgot what he had done and the miracles he had shown them. In the sight of their ancestors he worked marvels, in the land of Egypt and in the fields of Zoan. He passed the sea, he divided the sea and let them pass through it. He made the waters stand like the heap. In the daytime he led them with a cloud, and all night long with a fiery light. He split rocks open in the wilderness. He gave them drink abundantly as from the deep. He made streams come out of rock. He caused rivers to flow down like waters to flow down like rivers. Yet they sinned still more against him, rebelling against the Most High in the desert. They tested God with their heart by demanding food they craved. They spoke against God, saying, "Can God spread a table in the wilderness? Even though he struck the rocks so the water gushed out and the torrents overflowed, can he also give bread or provide meat for his people?" Therefore, when the Lord heard, he was full of rage. A fire was kindled against Jacob. His anger mounted against Israel, because they put no faith in God and did not trust his saving power. Yet he commanded the skies above and opened the doors of heaven. He rained down on them manna to eat. He gave them the grain of heaven. Mortals ate of the bread of angels. He sent them food in abundance. He caused the east wind to blow in the heavens, and by his power he led out the south wind. He rained flesh upon them like dust, winged birds like the sand of the seas. He let them fall within their camps, all around their dwellings, and they all ate and were well filled, for he gave them what they craved. But before they had satisfied their craving, and while food was still in their mouths, the anger of God rose against them, and he killed the strongest of them and laid low the flower of Israel. In spite of all this, they still sinned. They did not believe in his wonders. So he made their days vanish like a breath, and their years in terror. When he killed them, they sought for him. They repented and sought God earnestly. They remembered that God was their rock, the Most High God their Redeemer. But they flattered him with their mouths and lied to him with their tongues. Their heart was not steadfast towards him. They were not true to his covenant. Yet he, being compassionate, forgave their iniquity and did not destroy them. Often he restrained his anger. He did not stir up his wrath. He remembered that they were but flesh, a wind that passes and does not come again. How often they rebelled against him in the wilderness and grieved him in the desert. They tested God again and again and provoked the Holy One of Israel. They did not keep in mind his power on the day when he redeemed them from the foe, when he displayed his signs in Egypt and his miracles in the fields of Zoan. He turned their rivers to blood, so they could not drink of their streams. He sent among them swarms of flies which devoured them, and frogs which destroyed them. He gave them their crops to the caterpillar, and their fruit to the labor to the locust. He destroyed their vines with hail, and the sycamores with frost. He gave over their cattle to the hail, and their flocks to thunderbolts. He let loose on them his fierce anger, wrath, indignation, and distress, a company of destroying angels. He made a path for his anger. He did not spare them from death, but gave their lives over to the plague. He struck all the firstborn of Egypt, the first issue of their strength in the tents of Ham. He led out his people like sheep, and guided them in wilderness like a flock. He led them in safety, so they were not afraid, but the sea overwhelmed their enemies, and he brought them to his holy hill, to the mountain that his right hand had won. He drove out nations before them. He apportioned them for a possession, and settled the tribes of Israel in their tents. Yet they tested the Most High God and rebelled against him. They did not observe his decrees, but turned away and were faithless like their ancestors. They twisted like a treacherous bow, for they provoked him to anger with their high places and moved him to destroy jealousy with their idols. When God heard, he was full of wrath, and he utterly rejected Israel. He abandoned his dwelling at Shiloh, the tent where he dwelt among mortals, and delivered his power to captivity, his glory to the hand of the foe. He gave his people to the sword and vented his wrath on his heritage. Fire devoured their young men, and their girls had no marriage song. Their priests fell by the sword, and their widows made no lamentation. Then the Lord awoke as from sleep, like a warrior shouting because of wine. He put his adversaries to rout and put them to everlasting disgrace. He rejected the tent of Joseph. He did not choose the tribe of Ephraim, but he chose the tribe of Judah, Mount Zion, which he loves. He built his sanctuary like the high heavens, like the earth which he has founded forever. He chose his servant David and took him from the sheepfolds, from tending the nursing ewes he brought him, to be the shepherd of his people Jacob, of Israel his inheritance. With upright heart he tended them and guided them with skillful hand. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. God bless you. Enjoy Lent, and